So climate change is clearly one of the biggest issues that we face as a society today, and has been for many, many years and will be well into the future. We recognize fully that we are part of the problem, so we must be part of the solution. I think a lot of cases these days, people tend to make or look at situations as really black or white. Either we have tourism or we don't have tourism. And I think in a situation like a company like ours, we really firmly believe that the kinds of experiences we offer to people can change their lives, mentally and physically. And I think it can get people thinking about the world in a very different way, about how to take care of these places and still operate a business.
I think it's the best place for people to connect with these big landscapes that we're so lucky to spend time in. I think it's like that word, awe-inspiring, when you go out and people get to see glaciers and they get to see these big spires. It's incredible.
So there's all the positive aspects of those helicopters being able to run a business that allow people to be in places they wouldn't otherwise be. But the duality of that is, the other side of it is that, of course, those machines can be loud and they can burn a lot of jet fuel. Gmoser was really the first one in the industry that began to realize that these were very special places and we needed to take care of them. We actually had he used to say, a moral and ethical responsibility to do so. So I think right from the first days of his operation, he always talked to the guides about taking care of these places and doing what they could to make sure that our footprint was small and our impact from a benefit perspective was really high.
Part of a guide's job and responsibility is to teach. Finding old photographs from as far back as 1946 relating to one of the glaciers that we used to hike on. That glacier no longer exists. It's been hugely impactful. Yeah, when you can imagine and remember walking on a sheet of ice that was 300 feet thick, and now it's actually a lake. Teaching from one's own personal experience, I think, has the greatest value. They're getting something that someone has been seeing over a period of time. I think that has huge value. And from an environmental point of view and what we do at CMH, I think that's our responsibility.
Business growth has historically been connected to energy usage. So the trick is to decouple these two areas. In most cases, this can now be disconnected through innovation technology, through behavioral change, etc. So it's the source of emissions that largely determine how rapidly a company can decarbonize. There's something called a mitigation hierarchy when it comes to emissions reductions. And that means, how does a company prioritize the steps they're going to take to get on that low carbon pathway? So what CMH is doing is measuring, and they're reducing, and then they're offsetting. And that's exactly the right order of things they should be doing.
These wild places are everything to us. They really are. And it's not just about the money. It's not just about choosing to operate or not. It's about how we thoughtfully operate in these wild places. So really, in the climate change and energy piece, we are looking at three specific areas. One is around tracking our footprint. That gives us a kind of a baseline to work from. Then we look at every possible opportunity of doing reductions. But in every one of the lodges, we use a variety of different kinds of fuels. On the remote lodges, it's mostly diesel, propane, and some gasoline that we use. And in those remote lodges, as you can imagine, in the winter months when it's cold and dark, our generators are running full. And so as much as possible in those lodges, we're trying to look at any possible opportunity of reducing the amount of fossil fuels that we use, be it diesel or propane. Even back in Hans's days in the early 80s, he started looking at studying opportunities in many of our lodges to do microhydro. We built one in Galena, and that's actually one of our first locations. We've actually been running on clean power at that lodge ever since. We've reduced our consumption of diesel to basically zero, and 60 to 70% of our propane use has disappeared as a result of having that microhydro system in place. Hopefully we'll get to a system where all of our remote lodges are on microhydro, and we get rid of all of that diesel and much of our propane use right out of our system completely. That will reduce the footprints of each of those lodges between 10 and 20%, which is a very, very dramatic reduction. In all of our lodges, we have both lodge-based fuel systems and remote fuel caches. And as you can imagine, we do use a lot of fuel every year. We're trying to minimize that as much as we can. But for the fuel that we do have on site, we try to have leading edge systems in place, and we're building those right now going beyond even what the government regulators will want from us. We don't want to have a single drop of fuel going in the environment. We want to have it used for our purposes and never ever being spilled or leaked. With every company, that you get to a certain point where you can't reduce your footprint anymore. So in that case, then we look at how we might be able to offset the actual footprint of our company by purchasing carbon offsets. I've always said right from day one that the offsets that we are choosing have to be as local as possible, have to be the greatest benefit possible, the best possible story, and also ultimately some kind of an economic development tool to help those local communities. And we're purchasing offsets now, and we'll continue to purchase offsets every year with those same kind of criteria, looking as much locally as we possibly can. And we also encourage our guests through the same system to offset their travel to and from Canada, wherever they happen to be coming from in the world. Everything we're doing goes right back to the early days when Hans first started. In the case of CMH, we're always striving to get better and better. There will be no end point to that. It will be continuous, long-term journey that will always be on. There will always be opportunities for us to get better and better as we move forward into the future.